What if last night didn't simply hurt the person you love, but changed something inside them? Sometimes one moment can shatter an illusion, awaken a buried fear, or reveal a truth someone has spent years trying to escape. And today, you may notice something different. They may be quieter, colder, more distant. But here's what you need to understand. They may not be pulling away because they stopped loving you. They may be pulling away because they can no longer be the person they were before last night, and what happens next could change your relationship forever. Sometimes a single night can leave a person carrying an emotional weight they cannot explain the next morning. Nothing about their face may look dramatically different. They may wake up, speak to you, answer your questions, even smile, and yet something inside them has shifted. This is because certain experiences do not simply happen to us. They force us to see something about ourselves that we were not prepared to see. Perhaps last night exposed a fear they had been hiding. Perhaps they realized how deeply they could be hurt, how much they depended on someone, or how much resentment had quietly accumulated beneath the surface. Maybe they said something they had never dared to say before. Maybe you saw an emotional reaction that surprised even them. This is where you must be careful. When someone suddenly behaves differently after an intense emotional experience, it is tempting to assume that the meaning is obvious. You may think they don't love me anymore, or they have changed their mind about us. But human emotions are rarely that simple. A person can still love you and feel completely different about the relationship at the same time. They can miss you and still avoid you. They can want to reach for you and simultaneously feel the need to protect themselves from getting closer. They can care deeply while becoming unusually silent. Why? Because something has been awakened inside them. There are parts of the human personality that remain hidden for years. We learn how to function, how to please others, how to appear strong, and how to maintain the image we have created of ourselves. But intense emotional moments can break through those defenses. Suddenly, emotions that were pushed down begin demanding attention. And when that happens, the person may not immediately understand themselves. They may replay last night repeatedly in their mind. They may remember your words, their own reaction, the look on your face, or the silence that followed. They may ask themselves why they became so angry, why they felt so vulnerable, or why something that seemed small affected them so deeply. The important thing is that the event itself may not be the entire story. What happened last night may have simply opened a door. Behind that door could be an old wound, an unresolved fear, a buried disappointment, or a truth they have avoided confronting. And once that hidden material rises into consciousness, it becomes difficult to return completely to the person they were before. This is why their behavior afterward may seem confusing. They may need more space. They may speak less. They may suddenly question things they once accepted without hesitation. Do not immediately interpret the change as hatred, rejection, or the death of love. Sometimes distance is not about abandoning another person. Sometimes it is about trying to understand what has happened inside yourself. When someone experiences an intense emotional moment, the person they love can sometimes come connected to the very feelings they are struggling to understand. This does not necessarily mean you caused the pain. In fact, you may have done nothing wrong. But because you were present when something emotionally significant happened, your presence can become a reminder of everything they are trying to process. This is one reason a person may suddenly begin creating distance after being extremely close to you. From the outside, it can look confusing. Yesterday, they wanted your attention. Today, they seem distracted. Yesterday, they opened their heart. Today, they barely speak. You naturally begin asking yourself what changed. But emotional withdrawal is not always a declaration of lost love. Sometimes it is a form of psychological protection. Imagine someone carrying an emotion they cannot yet name. Every conversation with you brings that emotion back to the surface. Every familiar gesture reminds them of what happened. Even your kindness may become difficult to receive because it makes them feel vulnerable at a moment when they are desperately trying to regain control. So they create distance, not necessarily because they want to punish you, but because distance temporarily gives them the illusion that they can silence what they are feeling. This creates one of the strangest contradictions in human relationships. A person can desperately want someone and still avoid them. They can miss your voice while refusing to call. They can think about you constantly while pretending not to care. They can look at your messages and leave them unanswered because responding would force them to confront emotions they are not ready to face. There may even be moments when they become cold without understanding why. The colder they become, the more they may believe they are protecting themselves. But underneath that coldness could be fear. Fear of dependence. Fear of rejection. Fear that they have revealed too much. Fear that if they let you close again, they will lose control of emotions they have been trying to contain. And this is where many relationships become misunderstood. The person on the other side sees the distance and thinks they don't care anymore. Meanwhile, the person withdrawing may be thinking, if I get closer, I will have to feel everything again. Those are two completely different realities occurring inside the same relationship. That is why you should pay attention not only to what they are doing, but to the emotional pattern behind their behavior. Sudden silence, hesitation, avoidance, defensiveness, or unusual emotional control can sometimes indicate an internal struggle rather than a simple lack of affection. Of course, not every withdrawal means hidden love. Sometimes people genuinely change their feelings, and that possibility should not be ignored. But when the change appears immediately after a powerful emotional experience, it is worth considering that something deeper may be happening. You may have become associated with a truth they can no longer avoid. And when someone is not ready to face that truth, the easiest thing to move away from may be the person who reminds them of it most strongly. There are moments in life when an emotional experience does more than hurt us. It changes the way we understand ourselves. Before last night, this person may have carried a certain image of who they were. They may have believed they were strong, independent, trusting, emotionally controlled, or completely certain about what they wanted from love. But sometimes one powerful experience is enough to make that old identity feel impossible to maintain. This is why their behavior may seem so unfamiliar afterward. They are not necessarily pretending. They may genuinely feel different because something inside their psychological world has been disturbed. The beliefs they once depended on may no longer provide the same sense of security. Perhaps they always believed they could trust you. Now they are questioning that belief. Perhaps they believed they were incapable of becoming deeply attached. Suddenly they realize how much your presence affects them. Maybe they believed they had moved beyond an old wound only to discover that the wound was still alive beneath the surface. These realizations can be deeply uncomfortable. When a person's old understanding of themselves begins to collapse, they often experience an inner period of confusion. They may become quieter because they are thinking more than speaking. They may appear detached because they are trying to organize emotions that do not fit into the story they previously told themselves. They may ask questions they never considered before. Why did I react so strongly? Why did those words hurt me so much? Why am I afraid of losing this person? Why do I suddenly want to run away? Was I pretending to be okay all this time? These questions are important because they reveal something deeper. The person is no longer simply reacting to what happened. They are beginning to confront themselves, and self-confrontation can be frightening. Most people prefer a comfortable explanation for who they are. We build identities around our habits, relationships, memories, and beliefs. We tell ourselves, this is who I am. But a powerful emotional experience can expose contradictions inside that identity. Someone who always considered themselves emotionally strong may discover how vulnerable they actually are. Someone who believed they needed nobody may realize how deeply they depend on another person's presence. Someone who thought they had forgiven the past may discover that the old pain still controls their reactions. This does not mean they are broken. It means an old psychological structure may no longer be sufficient. And when that happens, transformation begins. But transformation rarely looks beautiful in the beginning. It can look like confusion, silence, mood changes, uncertainty, or withdrawal. The person may need time to understand what has been awakened within them before they can explain it to anyone else. This is why trying to force immediate answers can sometimes make things worse. If they are still struggling to understand themselves, demanding that they explain everything may push them further into defensiveness. What they need first may not be another argument or another explanation. They may need enough emotional space to recognize what the experience revealed, because sometimes the greatest change does not happen when someone decides to leave another person. It happens when they can no longer continue living as the version of themselves they believed they were. What happens after a powerful emotional experience is not determined only by what happened. It is determined by what the person does with what happened. Two people can experience the same kind of emotional shock and move in completely different directions. One may use it as a reason to become more honest, more self-aware, and more emotionally mature. Another may bury it so deeply that it slowly changes the way they love, trust, and connect with others. This is why the days and weeks afterward can matter so much. If this person is willing to face what they are feeling, something meaningful can begin to happen. They may eventually recognize the fear underneath their anger, the insecurity underneath their silence, or the old wound underneath their sudden defensiveness. What initially felt like emotional chaos can become an opportunity for understanding. They may begin to realize that the problem was not simply the argument, the betrayal, the disappointment, or the painful conversation. The deeper issue may have been something they carried long before you entered their life. And once they recognize that, their behavior can change again. They may return to the conversation with greater honesty. They may admit things they were previously too afraid to say. They may stop pretending that everything is fine. They may finally explain why they reacted the way they did. But there is another possibility. They may decide that avoiding the pain is easier than understanding it. Instead of confronting their emotions, they may suppress them. Instead of communicating, they may disappear. Instead of asking themselves difficult questions, they may blame you, blame circumstances, or convince themselves that they simply stopped caring. This can create a very different transformation. The person may become emotionally guarded. They may stop expressing vulnerability. They may become suspicious of affection. They may avoid meaningful conversations because intimacy now feels dangerous. And slowly the person you once recognized begins to feel distant. This is why you should not judge the entire future of the relationship based on one emotional reaction. A person can change after a painful experience. But change is not always permanent. Sometimes what looks like a final withdrawal is actually a temporary period of emotional processing. Other times, the experience exposes a fundamental difference that cannot be ignored. The crucial question is whether they are moving toward awareness or away from it. Are they trying to understand what happened? Are they willing to take responsibility for their part? Can they speak honestly without attacking or shutting down? Can they acknowledge your feelings while also acknowledging their own? These signs tell you far more than silence alone. And you must also remember something important. You cannot do another person's inner work for them. You can offer patience, honesty, and compassion, but you cannot force someone to confront a truth they are determined to avoid. Sometimes love gives a person the safety to transform. Sometimes love reveals that transformation is necessary, and sometimes the most difficult realization is that loving someone deeply does not guarantee that they will choose to face themselves. The experience may change them, but the direction of that change ultimately depends on whether they are willing to understand the part of themselves that was awakened. What happened last night may have changed something inside them, but it doesn't have to define what happens next. Sometimes a painful moment reveals what was hidden so it can finally be understood. If you truly love this person, don't rush to judge their silence. Give them space, but don't lose yourself trying to save them. Because sometimes the greatest transformation begins when we finally face what we've been running from. Thank you for listening. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment to reflect, and I'll see you in the next one.